sermon with the second of the 3 points that we set forth. Last week, we looked at the role. And for whatever reason, the women got to set us up for that role. We're going to look today at the reverence, that holy awe, that deep, abiding love for what is good and for what is right and what is true, which is the family, and that responsibility of reverence before God and to God, and reverence for the gift of a wife and children, a man ought to have burned in his heart. And then next week we will look at the reward, which is our children, and how we are to manage them, and what their role is, for they too have a role in the stewardship of the family, and a responsibility before God, and, an accountability for how they act as a young person before they are released into the world to start their own family and become a part of society. So today, beloved, we're going to turn our focus towards this idea of the man being the leader and the lover of the family. Now, if you'll recall last week, and if you were at the men's breakfast, you heard that phrase, leader and lover. That's the phrase that we're using in our study in the book of James, gentlemen. And by the way, the first Saturday of every month, we get together for breakfast here at the church, 8 o'clock. We have a good breakfast, even though I cook it. Sometimes, we get good bacon. John cooked it last week, and the smell of bacon was in the church last week. Don't forget, that's coming up. Can you believe we've got a whole month of 2015 gone? And not this Saturday, but the Saturday after. This will be the first Saturday in February. Hard to believe. So come on and be a part of that. But we threw out that phrase, leader and lover of the family. Now, even the secular world acknowledges the need for the father and how important the role of the father is. In an article that was entitled Parent-Child Relationships and Children's Images of God in the Journal of the Scientific Study of Religion, Dr. R. Dickey and Dr. Don M. Marasco writes the following. In the lives of children, God joins company with kings, superheroes, and on and on. See, in their mind, he's one of those, okay? Child psychiatrist Robert Coles noted that children connect themselves, connect their race, their class, their gender, their family experience, and their personal experiences to their thinking about God. While Cole's work is provocative, it does not systematically explore factors influencing children's perceptions of God. What does influence children's concepts of God? One factor suggests in both religious and psychological writing is that the relationship between children and their parents, and that's from a study done by Berkey and Ball in 1987, another study from Gleason in 1975, another study of Tamayo and Desjardins in 1976, another study in 1979 from Vergat, and then another study by Albert, A-U-B-E-R-T, in 1972, all come to the same conclusion. All these scientists in all these different places in the world come to the same conclusion. Listen. Oh, and Justice and Lambert, I forgot them, in 1986, compared the words adults use to describe their childhood recollections of their parents with their current perceptions of God. Now listen. They found a direct correlation between subjects' images of their father and those of their perception of God. Listen to that one more time. They found a correlation between subjects' images of their father and those of God, but no correlation between the image of mother and those of God. Now, ladies, don't be offended by that. I want you to think about the truth, that the reason that is because not only do we know God as a loving God, first of all, in most of our lives, we know God what? Father. We know Him as a judging God. How many times as a police officer did I hear people say, he's going to get you, they point to me, if you don't behave. And so I'm sitting there thinking, okay, here I'm a police officer, the kid gets in trouble, he really needs me. And you just told him, don't go to this guy because he's the bad guy. And that's what we say about God. God's going to get you. If you don't do this, God's going to get you. And generally the dad is the one that metes out authority. He's the one that does the spanking. He's the one that does the punishment. At least that was the way it was in my household growing up. Now I know in some families today we don't believe in that anymore, and that's really sad. Because what we're doing is raising a generation of children that are going to be unruly, and they're going to do all kinds of incredibly heinous things. Just look in the culture.
Amen.
It's all right there. Now, don't hear me. I don't think that I'm saying you ought to beat your child. I'm not. I think discipline, is, according to the Scripture, is loving. But it also has to do with my hand at the back of the bottom, or sometimes the belt at the back of the bottom, if it's necessary. To discipline, to train, and to help that child grow into who they ought to be. Because you know what? There's a lot of kids like me, and they just got a strong will. And sometimes that will need a little redirection. A little redirection. So we get, apparently according to this article, our perception of who God is from where? The picture of our Father. Now tragically, Martin Luther said that he hated to think about that because his father was so wicked, so evil. You know who Martin Luther was, not Martin Luther King, the real Martin Luther from, well, I guess Martin Luther King's the real Martin Luther, but Martin Luther from the 1700s, okay, who nailed the 99 Theses on the door of the Gutenberg Church and started the Protestant Reformation, which is what you've come from as a Baptist. But even old Sigmund Freud, whom I'm not a real fan of in terms of his understanding of psychology and practices, he even said, I cannot think of any need in childhood as strong as the need for a father's protection. So not only do we see God as the judge, but we do also see God as our protector, as the one who looks over us, watches over us. Well, let's go back then, beloved, to Ephesians chapter 5 this morning. Let's read our text again here. And we're going to read it the whole way each time because I want to burn it in your brain. There's a lot of Bible verses in here you ought to memorize. Look there with me then at Ephesians chapter 5, beginning in verse 22. Wives, be subject to your own husbands as to the Lord, for the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ also is the head of the church, he himself being the Savior of the body. But as the church is subject to Christ, so also the wives ought to be to their husband in everything. Think about that, ladies, before you make a decision on who you're going to marry. Think about that. This is your calling from God and the role that He's called you to, that you are asked to live in and work under. Be careful who you choose. 25. Husbands, this is where we're going to be today, gentlemen. Love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave Himself up for her, so that He might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, that He might present to Himself the church in all her glory, having no spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that she would be holy and blameless. So husbands ought to also love their own wives as their own body. He who loves his own wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ also does the church, because we are members of His body. For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother, a direct quote here, by the way, from Genesis, and shall be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This mystery is great. But I am speaking with reference to Christ and the church. Nevertheless, each individual among you also is to love his own wife, even as himself, and the wife must see to it that she respects her husband. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and your mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may be well with you, and that you may live long on the earth. There is your promise. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and in the instruction of the Lord. Class. All right, would you notice first off today, gentlemen, that in last week's message, God was able to deal with the ladies and in their role as a wife and a mother with 3 simple verses. Do you see those? 22, 23, and 24. But would you note, gentlemen, would you note that for us, God figured that we needed a little more instruction. I don't know whether that's because we're dense like me. Maybe some of you are not quite as dense as me. Or maybe we're a little hard-headed. Maybe just a little hard to get through with. But if you'll take a note there, you'll see that He's used, what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 3 times as many as it took for the girls. What can I say? God knows best, okay? And He understands the nature of who we are, and He understood that when He created man and put him in the garden and He named everything, and then He gave him Eve, and then He sat there and watched his wife being deceived by the serpent and didn't intervene, didn't say a thing, sat there, chewing on a leaf or whatever he was doing. I don't know what he was doing, but we know he was there because it's in the plural when Satan speaks back to her, but he didn't do what he was supposed to do, so God then figures, I guess, gentlemen, we're going to make it clear. I want you to also understand another concept that's here that's very important. What is the first command for a husband in verse 25? Love your wife. Would you go back to the last 3 verses? Did God command the woman anywhere to love you, gentlemen? No. Nope, He didn't. You know why? It's your nature. Now, I know this is another topic we don't like to talk about, but you know what? Even the way you were created, ma'am, your physical body, your hormones, your emotions, your mental, everything about who you are, God created as a giver of life. God created as a nurturer. God created as a protector. God created as a teacher and a caregiver. Yeah, I know we don't like that anymore today. That's why women originally were nurses. Now, my wife tells me all the nurses love to have a male nurse because he's strong enough to move the patients around. And some of the patients today are a little bigger than they used to be 100 years ago. Thank you, Diane. But the reality is, God has created you, and He's given you a psyche and an emotional well-being that is designed to be a person who loves, who gives life, who nurtures. Literally, from your own body, you will sacrifice yourself for your children. God doesn't have to tell you to love. But for some reason, He determined that He had to tell a man to love. Because I'm afraid sometimes we give more affection to our hound dog than we do to our wife.
Amen.
Hey,
Is that wrong?
I'm just saying it like it is. Yes, actually it is. Actually it is. Animals regretfully don't have souls. Anyway, beloved, look here at this passage. Because, gentlemen, I want you to understand that God is serious about you understanding what He's telling you this morning. Because you need to know that 6 times over, He commands you to love your wife. Now, the first thing that we want to talk about is this concept of leader. Do you see anything in this passage about a man being a leader? No, you don't. Where is it? It's implicit in the first 3 verses. Isn't that interesting? That's interesting to me because God is not demanding and commanding it. He's saying that is the role when things get bad that has to be taken. But otherwise, I believe He's made it a part of the import of the woman's world so that we don't think we can domineer. Do you see what I'm saying? Look here. It says that a woman is supposed to be subject to her own husband. How can she be subject to someone who's not a leader? Can she? No. And I don't know any woman that does a good job of that. And there's an awful lot of men out there in our world today, beloved, and they won't take leadership. You know what I heard more from women than anything else, gentlemen, in pastoral counseling? If he would just make a decision, if he would just get up from that TV and do something. He doesn't do anything. He doesn't plan our vacations. He doesn't plan any time for us to go out. He doesn't plan the birthday parties. He doesn't even plan to get up and go to church on Sunday. I have to do it all. And guess what, gentlemen? If you let her, she will. And you know what? Now you're wrong. She's wrong and you're wrong. Then you know what the woman says to me? Well, what am I supposed to do? Just let my family, go, well, no, ma'am, you're not supposed to do that. But you're supposed to encourage your husband to be the leader of the family. And sometimes you maybe just kind of zip your mouth and step back and let him do what he's supposed to do. Is there an example of that in the Bible? There's a bunch of them. May I remind you of Sarah? Abram's wife? Sarah? Sarah, and then she was Sarah, and he was eventually Abraham. But do you remember when he went into the land and he told his wife what? By the way, tell these people you're my sister. Now, that's not a true lie. It was a half lie, which, by the way, those are the hardest ones to ever deal with. Because when you got a partial truth, whew, that's hard to figure out. And so he said, just tell them that you're my sister so they won't kill me, because you are so gorgeous like Penny that, they'll kill me just to get you. Now let me ask you a question, ladies. What do you think that Sarah was thinking when the king sent for her and took her and put her into the one-year program of oils and baths and perfumes and all this stuff? Now she was probably thinking initially, this is great, much better than sand in a tent. But you know what? It should probably eventually have dawned on her, this guy's planning on taking me to be his wife. I'm already married to my husband. Hey, by the way, king, I'm married. Did she do that? No. In fact, God had to tell the king through a plague of boils that she was another man's wife. Now wait a minute. Abraham, who obviously loved her, told her to lie or tell a partial truth. She was taken into the harem of the kings to be prepared for a year. I don't know how long this period of time was she got to be in there, but I'm sure she's thinking about it the whole time, wondering what in the world he is thinking and what he has done to me. What have you done to me? Well, I got to stand up and defend myself. I got to take my rights into my own hand, because this man you gave me, God, he is worthless. Is that what she did? That's what we do, don't we, ladies? It's what you do in our culture today. You just take over. And why do they have to do that, gentlemen? Because you are sitting on your blessed assurance, not doing what you're supposed to do. You see, the very first role that we have is implicit in the woman's command. And I believe that it's implicit there and not directly stated by God, so that you don't lord it over her, so that you take that leadership role, and have what you've been hearing me say, leader and lover. So you take that leadership role, understanding the reality that God has commanded her to be under you, as you and she both are under him. You know, one of the verses that we forget when we teach this passage in Ephesians is verse 21. Look there for a moment. What does it say in Ephesians 5:21? And be subject to one another in the fear of Christ. That is the predicate before the statement, wives, be subject to your husband, be subject to one another in the fear of Christ. Men, you are given leadership, but not to lord it over. You are given leadership to love. Now listen, I know you ladies are probably just sitting there, oh yeah, get it, Pastor. Well, I'm going to just say to you ladies, listen to me. Don't be playing that game, because that's not going to help to have him come to the place that God earnestly, sincerely desires him to be. Amen. Because you see, if you got to make me do something, I'm going to do it like this. And I'm going to punch a hole in the wall. And you're going to doggone well know exactly what I mean when I say don't. But you know what? When I'm sitting there at 1 in the morning and my little wife wakes up and goes to the potty and comes in there and rubs my neck and rubs my shoulder, you know what I do? What do you want, baby? What was I saying? How you doing, honey? I don't know. I was writing a sermon. Oh, well, let you get back to it. Listen, gentlemen. There is nothing wrong with being soft and being tender to the person that you chose, that God has given, who gives herself openly and freely to you. There is nothing wrong with that at all. In fact, that, my dear friend, is an incredible gift that she is giving when she says to you that you are mine and I am yours. And we must never forget that truth. And we must honor that truth in our life. So though it is very clear implicitly in this passage that as the husband and as the father in my family that I am supposed to take leadership, it is also as clear to me that I need to take that leadership in humble reverence. Remember that phrase? In responsibility. The second principle, y'all think this stuff is just thrown out there. This is all connected together and it has meaning and has purpose, and the thread can't be disconnected, because you disconnect in one place, beloved, and the whole thing comes apart. So I am called to accept that role of leadership in love. I used to hear the phrase, I'm the head of the house, but my wife is the neck. Whichever way that neck turns, that's the way the head is going to go. And that's not such a bad thing. Because remember what we talked about from Genesis? You half a man. Or excuse me, you're half a human, gentlemen. Ladies, you're half a human too. He's got one half, you got the other half. And when you come together, you got a chance of being whole if it's in Christ. And so I need the way that Penny sees, perceives, and understands the world. She needs the way I see and perceive and understand the world. We need that jointly together as a couple in one flesh, so that we can be who God wants us to be as a mother and a father, as giving members of a culture and a society. Because without her, I don't have the other perspective, and without me, she doesn't have the other perspective. We need each other. Now, I don't discount the fact that Paul tells us that some have been given the gift to live alone, and that's fine. I understand that. Well, no, I don't understand that, but I appreciate that because God did it. Paul says it's true, and so I'm going to believe that it's true. It's not for Kenny Gooch, believe me. I know it's not for Penny either, because she does love you. But the reality is, beloved, I am to accept this role from God under His authority, and I am to love my wife. How does it say? Look there, gentlemen. What does it say? Just as Christ also loved the church and gave Himself up for her. So not only do I have a stewardship of leadership in the family, that stewardship of leadership is bounded by what? It's bounded by godly love. The stewardship of my leadership role and responsibility to my wife and to my children and to the society in which my family functions, beloved, that stewardship is to be managed in the context of the love of God. Now that is a love that is willing to sacrifice itself. Isn't that what Jesus did? That love is a love that's willing to set aside its personal preferences, its desires, even its whims for the sake of our wife and of our family. Now God didn't tell you this, gentlemen, just one time. 3 times over, count it, 3 times over, He commands it or tells us to do it, and He uses the word 6 times. Look at verse 25. Husbands, love your wives. That's the first one we've already done. Look at verse 28. So husbands ought to also love their own wives as their own bodies. And verse 33, nevertheless, no matter what else, each individual among you also is to love his own wife, even as himself. Listen, men, it is of paramount significance that the Lord Jesus Christ led Paul to exhort us to love our wives 3 times over. 3 is a good number. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. It's a number of completion. It's a good number. And we are exhorted to love our wives 3 times over. I hope and pray that my Penny feels loved 3 times over. I want her to feel loved 3 times over. I want her to know she's loved 3 times over. And I want these things because God wants me to want these things. And you know what, beloved? You can grow yourself as you commit yourself to Christ and His Word to love others, even that wife. That in some of the churches I've pastored, I've had some think they just got a cantankerous old woman. And I said, well, you married her when she was a young woman, and more than likely, I suspect just like water in a pipe rusted out, you might be the one that rusted her up. See, it's the way that we treat our spouse. Listen to me, men. Are you starting to see the picture that the weight of a marriage relationship, the weight of a family dynamic, sits squarely on our shoulders? Think of how you're built, gentlemen. Where is your great strength? Your upper body. I mean, you know, I never look muscly, but my wife thinks I got big muscles. And I'm like, oh yeah. I know, but she's like, wow, she goes, whoa, look at that muscle, or whatever. I'm like, oh, yeah. I appreciate that, because that's one of those things a man needs, admiration, right? I mean, that's one of those 5 things in Will and Harley's book that a man needs, okay? So I'm appreciative of that, right? And I would just say to you, there's not a single lady in here today that could take any one of us men in here today, unless we were, ill or whatever, okay? And that's another one of those things that concerns me about female police officers and women in the military. And, again, y'all think I'm a male chauvinist pig, and you're wrong. I'm a male chauvinist Christian. Not a pig. I'm a Christian. And God says this is the way it ought to be. And you know what? When I had female officers go and get called out as a second for me, and I was in a place I was more worried about their well-being and safety than I was my own, and it could have gotten me killed.
Amen.
And you know what? The girls in our academy, they couldn't put a man over their shoulders and running up the 7 steps of the fire tower that they set on fire and running back down. But it was okay because they were women. So what does that mean for me when I get shot out in the field and I need you to run me down 7 flights of steps or up 7 flights of steps or out away from the gunfire? Whether I'm in the military or whether I'm in the police department. Well, hey, dude, that's your problem. We're both going to die. Well, that's not smart. Is that saying you're worse or better than a man? No. It's saying that's how God's built you and how God's made us. And God made us to be strong, to be hunters, to be gatherers, to be protectors and defenders of the family. And so the weight and the responsibility of the family rests on our shoulders. It's a mental and an emotional and a psychological process, but we are built, even in our physical bodies, to reflect that. God doesn't just do one piece of things. He builds you, ladies, to be the nurturers of the family, to be able to bear children, and even to feed those children. He makes us to be strong, to go out there and defend our families, provide for our families, and it's clear in every aspect. He doesn't trick us out. He doesn't try to fake us out and say, okay, I'm going to make him look like this, but this is what he's got to do. No, God is consistent. And the natural order that God has made is consistent. And what does it say in Romans? Even the creation of God screams the reality of His order, of His purpose, and of His plan. So what does the Bible say? So you are without excuse. Even if you never heard the word, you are without excuse, because you can see in everything that God does that He is consistent, He is faithful, and His plan fits His pattern, and His pattern supports His plan. Oh my goodness. The world doesn't want to hear that, beloved, and that's why we are in trouble in our world. What does Romans 12:1 say? I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercy of God, that you present your body a living sacrifice that is holy, that is acceptable to God, which is, look, I love the King James, or the New American Standard, which is your reasonable service. You see, men, we are given the strength and the ability to guard our families. And as a result of that, we are to present our bodies a living sacrifice, not only for God, but for our families. Now let me just say to you that the key to good stewardship of the family is to daily make our life a living sacrifice. Now don't hear this the wrong way. But if I was to ask any of you gentlemen in here today, would you lay down your life for your wife or your children? You know what? I bet every one of you would say yes. In a heartbeat, I wouldn't think twice about it. You'd be willing to die for your family. And I'm grateful for that. In fact, actually, you know what? You ask any of the ladies in here if they'd be willing to die for their children. I guarantee you they would, in a heartbeat, lay down their life for their children. So no difference there. But may I posit a thought? To die for a cause is a worthy and a noble thing. It's a one-time instantaneous event. And it's over. And you may or may not be remembered by the world. You will definitely be remembered by the person you saved. But maybe the rest of the world won't care. But may I ask you this? How much more difficult is it today make your life a living, not dying, a living sacrifice that is wholly and acceptable to God, which in the mind of God is basically as a steward It's not even above board to ask that of you. It's just a reasonable request, a reasonable expectation that you would feel this way, that you would act this way, that you would live this way and do these kinds of things. It's just reasonable. But let's be honest. How hard is that? Some days, very. Especially when things aren't going well at work, or I'm mad, or somebody just cut me off on the highway, or I've got financial worries, and you name it. Kids are sick, kids are doing things they shouldn't. All of those things weighing in. I can very easily get back to that grumpy, you're going to do it because I said so. And yet the reality is, beloved, the first principle of the stewardship of the family is to daily make my life a living sacrifice. First and foremost, I have got to love God. Because you need to understand that in the context of what we're reading, this was written to Christians. Now, I'm not saying this doesn't apply to non-Christians, because whether you're a believer or a non-believer, if you obey God's laws and you follow God's rules, life is good. And when you don't, life is not so good. Whether you do it intentionally or unintentionally, the laws and the orders that God has put into place in the spiritual realm and the natural realm, they all work. And they keep on working. The problem that we got, beloved, is some of the spiritual laws, or most of the spiritual laws of God, don't have an immediate effect. And so we think we get around it. We think we can skirt around it. If I was to walk out here and walk up this mountain over here and find me a little precipice somewhere with 150 to 300 feet and step off, what's going to happen?
You will die.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Why? Why am I going to die? Because God put a law in place called the law of gravity, which it took man several thousand years to figure out even existed. Isaac Newton, remember, sitting under the tree, supposedly, and the apple hits him on the head? He says, oh, hey, there's a common law here that works all the time. Now, you know what's cool about gravity? It's immediate. It's instantaneous. And it is merciless. Ask it to those two airlines that went down out there in the Asian seas. See, we as human beings can skirt the laws of God, but only for a time. Because, see, man figured out something God had already put in place. Because Leonardo da Vinci studied the wing of a bird, and he noticed that the top of the wing was curved and taller than the bottom of the wing, which meant that the air going over the top took longer to go, and the air going across the bottom didn't, and it created a willy that created an updraft. So that wing would actually lift that bird up. And man figured that out, so we put wings on planes. And we came up with all these sophisticated, neat gadgets and devices, and guess what? They work. But the moment one thing fails, guess what's still in place?
Gravity.
The law of gravity. And guess where you're going? So you think in your life, young person, you think in your life, sir, you think in your life, man, well, I've been doing this for 27 years and it hadn't hurt me yet. Does God's word speak against it? It's just waiting for you to fail, or for your man-made efforts and attempts to fail, because they will, and when they do, guess what?
Gravity.
Yeah, that's it, gravity. You see, that's why why Peter had to exhort people. People were saying, well, hey, where is this coming? Where is the promise of his coming? Everything goes on like it did from the beginning of creation. There can't be a God, nothing's happening. Now listen to this. It's God's love and patience that is waiting to give you every chance to be a good steward, to come to faith in Christ. He's doing that because of what? His love. Because he's the owner, he has the rights, and he is the owner of all. But he is the lover of a world that he created. And so, though we may skirt his law for a season, there is a consequence that is paid by us and everyone else. You said, well, what's the consequence when you get in an airplane with gravity? Well, the consequence is how much money it costs you to be up there. And you know that money represents something very important. And we'll get to it in one of our stewardship lessons here coming up soon. Because you know how you get that money? You exchange the only thing that you have that you can never get back. Your time. And so you exchange 20 hours, 3 weeks, 2 weeks, I don't know what you make, for a $300 or a $500 airline ticket. It costs you something. It costs you something to avert the laws that God put in place, whether they are natural laws or whether they are spiritual laws. So what does that have to do with anything, Pastor Kim? Well, it has to do with what's going on in our culture today. The redefinition of the family. That has to do, and we'll get into this in the next message in depth, that has to do with what's going on in the lives of our children in single-parent families, and a statistic that I have never come across that is absolutely staggering. Can I just throw it out? Did you know that statistics tell us now that children that are raised in a blended family where the husband and the wife are not necessarily the biological parent of all of the children, only one is. Did you know that statistically their level of performance, education-wise, their problem level in terms of getting in trouble with the law, of respect of authority, of being contributors to society, do you know that it is virtually identical to the child raised in a single-parent home? Don't believe the lie of the world. And we don't have any idea yet what this new redefinition of the family is going to mean, where 2 men are raising a little boy.
Amen.
Or 2 women are raising a little girl or a little boy. But you see, you cannot break God's law. You cannot break God's law and not pay a consequence.
Amen.
And if there is anything that we need to do as Christians today, beloved, it is to once again stand up and say, God is right, the world is wrong. Politician, if you don't support the family, if you don't promote godly Christian values, I will not vote for you. I will not put you in office. And if I can't find somebody who will do what's right, I will run myself.
Amen.
Can you imagine what would happen in America if we had a truly godly president elected? And if we could elect a Congress and a Senate that the vast majority were truly godly, I think we have no idea how wonderful it could be. But the reason they aren't there is because you and I don't care. And we say it in our attitudes and our actions. Listen to me, gentlemen. You are the leader, but you are the lover of your family. And you know what's interesting in this passage? So that he might sanctify her, verse 26 says, Jesus might sanctify the church, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word. You remember last week we were preaching along and I thought, oh my goodness, Lord just gave me a point. But wait a second, I'm going to write this down. Here it is. Gentlemen, do you know, well actually there's a book by Willard Harley. His needs, her needs. If you got a great marriage, get it and read it. It'll help you see why. If you got a mediocre marriage, read it. It'll help you revolutionize your marriage and get it better. If you got a bad marriage, it'll show you the things that you need to do, and ma'am, you need to do to make that marriage better. His needs, her needs. Willard Harley. 5 needs of a woman, 5 needs of a man. Some are the same. They're in definitely different orders. Different orders. You can guess what the first one is for a man. The first one for a woman is not that, it's affection. That's different than the one for the man. And so, gentlemen, I would say to you as we look at this passage here, that if it's important for Christ to wash the church with his words, it is important for you and for me to shower my wife with words of love, words of affirmation, words of kindness and goodness, words of thankfulness. You ever wonder why when you go into the sports rooms and the guys say, "Hi, Mom"? You ever wonder why they do that? I'll tell you why. Because she remembers their birthday. She remembers what cake they like and what meal they like, and she makes it. And she was there when they fell and skinned their knees learning how to play basketball or play football. Now, I'm not saying us men aren't there for that, but you know, some of us don't do so good at remembering birthdays and can't tell anybody, you know, what our wife's favorite candy bar is. 0. You know the white one? But you know what? If you have to do something, it's harder than if you get to do something. See, if you get to do something, you want to. You know what amazes me sometimes? It amazes me to hear my boys at work talk. They know the stats of every race car driver and every football team and every football player. But they don't even know their wife's birthday. Hello. That tells me where the priority is, huh? And that's not important, but it tells me, because you know who else it tells? It tells her. It tells her, gentlemen. There is nothing that should be more important to you and to me than for our wife to know beyond a shadow of a doubt that she is the most important thing in the world. There's a little song. It's a country song from a few years ago. Sometimes late at night, I wake and watch her sleeping. She's lost in peaceful dreams, so I turn out the light and lay there in the dark. And a thought crosses my mind. If I never wake up in the morning, would she ever doubt the way I feel about her in my heart? If tomorrow never comes, will she know how much I love her? That I try in every way to show her every day that she's my one and only. My time on earth is through, and she must face the world without me. Is the love I gave her in the past gonna be enough to last if tomorrow never comes? You see, gentlemen, the truth is, there's nothing more important to the family, nothing more important to your children. Now listen to this. And nothing more important to God than for you to genuinely and sincerely love your wife. God increase my better moments. God increase our better moments. And we will see. We will see incredible difference in our family, in our church, and in our world. In this case, moreover, it is required that the steward be thankful.
Amen.
Almighty God, you are our heavenly